Minister, when will the construction of your promised pipeline to the Pacific begin?
Probably never.
So to be clear, I believe you're referring to the pipeline to the Pacific that Alberta is proposing. So it's not our pipeline. It's being proposed by the province of Alberta as a proponent. And what they have indicated is they would be ready by July 1st to bring a proposal forward. At that time, we would be evaluating. And of course, the proponent is the one who brings it forward. So it's up to them to bring it forward at that point.
But you've made the agreement to all Canadians. You want Canada to be an energy superpower. A pipeline to the Pacific is necessary to get beyond the U.S. So on what date will the Pacific pipeline start getting built?
As I said, we don't build the pipelines. The proponents build the pipelines. It's up to the proponent to bring a proposal forward. My understanding is Alberta intends to meet its
So as you know, the proponents who would build that pipeline have said you have to repeal anti-energy laws, regulations, policies for them to be able to build that pipeline. You said you want to do that after C5. So how quickly will you get those laws fixed so that you can tell Canadians the date on which the pipeline that you promised to the Pacific will be constructed?
So as you well know, the federal government and the government of Alberta have a plan together to work collectively in collaboration with a shared goal.
So what are you doing to get the private sector proponent who will build the pipeline to the Pacific that you promised Canadians would get built, and in under 2 years, given the language around C5?
So we are working with Alberta and with the Pathways Alliance.
But on what date?
When the proponent brings it forward.
So there is no proponent, there is no pipeline, and you have no date. That sounds
Alberta,
so far like you're not
Alberta-
going to meet the promise you made. So I guess we'll
Alberta
move
has
on.
indicated they plan to be a proponent. The government
But
is not
you and
the
your
proponent.
Prime Minister have promised to make Canada an energy superpower. You say Canada is in a crisis because of our biggest trading partner, customer, and competitor who is threatening Canada. We need to get beyond those markets. You have promised the pipeline to the Pacific. That's an interjurisdictional pipeline for export,
Yep.
indisputably federal jurisdiction. So on what date will you want a private sector proponent to begin construction on the Pacific pipeline that you promised Canadians, of which the majority want to be built?
I know you'd like a different answer. The answer is the same. The proponent brings the proposal forward.
And the proponents have said they won't build a
just,
pipeline unless you change the laws. So when are you changing the laws?
just like the proponent for the Taylor to Gordondale pipeline brought it forward, and it was approved, and they are now building. And just like the
So we're more than a year in and you have no answer. Okay, so let's move on. On April 17th, 2025, the Prime Minister, as you well know, said China is Canada's greatest security threat. So just as Minister, I wonder, do you support more control of Canada's oil and gas by foreign regime-owned companies?
I believe what the Prime Minister said is we need to engage with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And
On
that
April
we need,
17th,
and that
he
we
was
need,
asked what is Canada's greatest security threat. His answer was China.
and what, if you'd let me answer, I will
It's
try
about
to
time
do
for
that.
time.
Yeah, let's not talk over one another, please. Minister?
Well, my first question was 10 seconds, and he did go for 35. So if you want to adjudicate like that, you go ahead, Chair. Or I'm going to have to.
Minister?
So what we said is China is the second largest trading country in the world. It is an important trading partner. We had a pause relationship with China. We are rebuilding our relations with China. We have a pragmatic engagement where we have a clear window in areas where we agree and areas where we don't agree.
So let me just ask you about one of the projects that you recently did refer to the MPO, that road, the Grays Bay project that leads to this Chinese state-owned Isaac mine. Now, you said Arctic security is a top priority. Conservatives have always said that. We agree. Does your government view this as a national security concern? And can you answer whether or not that mine has been designated for a national security review under the Investment Canada Act or by the MPO, which your legislation also seems to set out to be their role? The MPO.
The Grays Bay Port and Road is a national security priority. It is a development in the Arctic priority. It is an economic priority. There are many, many deposits along that road. Many, many potential proponents will be bringing things forward. To my knowledge, the company that I think you're referring to has not come forward and proposed a mine. If it did propose a mine, we would look at it at that time.
Is it just easy for you to rule out, as minister concerned about Canada's security and sovereignty, that you would rule out? Can I just actually finish my question?
Okay, sure.
Would you rule out majority Chinese ownership of Canadian resource development, say in oil and gas or critical minerals?
So what we have is we have the Investment Canada Act. We have the ability to look at any new investment in the country. We'll evaluate it against the realities of the time, and if we deem it a net benefit to Canada, it would proceed.
But
we have Chinese ownership.
China.
China's a major owner in LNG Canada 1.
This minister has the answers to literally nothing, and it's a reoccurring theme.
Minister, you've been ducking out of this committee for months now, and you're here, and I'm grateful that you are. But for this hour, we're supposed to go through the supplement estimates, the main estimates of 26-27, and then another hour of management of the Canadian nuclear laboratories by U.S. companies. So I will have 5 minutes to ask you questions about this important Canadian jewel in our nuclear industry that is being sold out, the management of, to an all-American-owned company group of companies. How big of a role did the Prime Minister have in putting together the government's policy on nuclear?
Zero.
So the Liberals have proclaimed a Buy Canada policy. How does that line up with selling out the controls of our nuclear labs to the Americans, and the Prime Minister has had zero input in this policy?
So the premise of your question is I think, flawed. The management of the nuclear assets is done by contract. There's a structure where it's done by contract.
I'm sorry, sir. That's not about the question. The question was, the first question was about nuclear labs, and you said that the Prime Minister had zero impact on the policy. Now, on the Buy Canada,
let's not misquote me. I didn't say
Canada.
Zero impact. I said zero involvement. Like, let's be clear. He had zero involvement.
So if he didn't have involvement, but he had impact?
No, he had zero involvement.
Which companies would have you met with on developing the nuclear policy then?
Are we talking about the nuclear strategy, or are we talking about...
All things nuclear here, sir. We were supposed to have you for an hour, and I got now 4 minutes.
Okay. Well,
So
I'm
which
happy to
companies have
answer
you
your
been
questions. You just
discussing?
got to be clear what the question is.
Well, the first question was on the Buy Canadian
Yeah.
policy of the government, and obviously you're ignoring that by going with the Buy All-American-owned group of companies. And
No,
talked about the
no,
Prime Minister have
that's
had
not-
zero impact, you said, or influence. And I wanted to know, on the third question was, which companies have, though? Who have you been meeting with?
Okay, I'm confused what you're... Are we talking about
Which
the nuclear
companies in
strategy?
the nuclear industry have you been meeting with in the last 10 months? You can get back to me on a written submission if that's...
Is this rocket science?
I've met with many, many companies. I'm happy to get you a written, if that's,
All right.
if that's helpful. But I'm happy to talk about it now, too, if you'd like.
Well, can you talk about how this is goes against Buy Canadian when you buy American?
So we're conflating nuclear strategy and labs. So if we want to talk, let's talk about the management of the labs. That is done by AECL. They decide, as an independent crown, what is the most cost-effective way.
We went through this. The board that the Liberals applied for, the board that made that decision was 100% appointed by Liberals. So it is the Liberal government.
It's a crown corporation where their fiduciary duty is to act independently. They ran a process.
So how Buy Canadian supposed to work then? If they're all independent, are they not following your Buy Canadian policy?
The way it works when you go out for tender, I mean, I've done this many, many, many times. You go out for tender, you get a series of tenders in. You evaluate those tenders against the criteria. You go back with another set of questions and demands in your negotiation. Some people fall away. You keep negotiating. Again, people fall away. At the end, there is one entity left.
I have limited time, sir, on the processes then. If you want to talk about how they excluded Canadian,
There was
have
no
learned
Canadians
that the
excluded.
CNL
There was
from the
no
VP
Canadians excluded.
informed that the committee that one of the requirements for a successful bid for the GoCo was experience that meant a winning bid had to come from outside of Canada. You rigged the bidding process so that a non-Canadian companies would receive this.
So the premise of your question is just fundamentally wrong. The ownership of the assets,
It's the man.
the ownership of the assets remains with Canada. The people who are managing it, 99% of them are in Canada and are Canadian.
But 100% owned by the Americans, and that's the concern that I have. Another important part, though. No,
So
this is
are
my
you-
time.
are you-
No, this is my time. I only got 5 minutes of an hour that was promised to me.
You actually only have 15 seconds.
Then I'll close with this then. Would it be easier? So you've been briefed on a whole bunch of nuclear, obviously. You're very knowledgeable, sir. Would you be easier to build a new heavy water plant or build a domestic enrichment capacity for uranium in Canada?
A brief
Which
answer,
one would be?
Minister.
I'm not sure what easier to build one versus I'm not sure in what context.
So we're going to need more heavy water in the future, and we're going to also need enriched uranium. Both come from outside of Canada. And
Thank
you as the
you
minister
both.
are not aware of which one we're going to build first, or which one's going to be tougher, or what one's going to be cost more money, is concerning for most people in nuclear.
We can come back to that.
I don't think
but
that's what I said.
This is actually brutal. He's just laughing and wasting time.